If your legs feel heavy by the end of the day, if you get that tingling in your feet after sitting too long, or if you've noticed those small veins starting to map themselves across your calves like a road you never asked to see, stay with me for the next 20 minutes or so, because I'm going to tell you about a fruit that most people already have sitting in their kitchen right now, one that very few doctors ever take the time to properly explain. This isn't magic, and it isn't a miracle. It's simply something nature has been quietly perfecting for thousands of years, while we, modern doctors, are only just now starting to understand why it actually works as well as it does, with research that's finally confirming what plenty of grandmothers already knew, even if they never had the science to explain it in those exact words. I'm Dr. Hale Thorne, and I've spent more than 30 years practicing medicine, the vast majority of that time working with patients well into their 60s, 70s, and beyond, specifically around circulation and vascular health in the legs. And I'll be honest with you, after standing for so many hours in clinics over the years, I started feeling that same heaviness in my own legs by the end of a long day. That sense that my own veins were quietly billing me for every single hour I'd spent on my feet that day. I remember the first time I actually noticed my own ankles a little more swollen than usual when I pulled off my shoes one evening and thought, how ironic. Here I am spending all day explaining this to other people, and now I'm the one living it firsthand. So what I'm about to share with you isn't just something I've recommended to hundreds of patients over the years. It's something I genuinely incorporated into my own life once I started feeling, firsthand, exactly what so many of my patients had been complaining about for years. Two of us figuring this out together, you and me, not so far apart in age as we might think. Before we get into it, I want to ask you for something. Down in the comments, tell me your age, and tell me honestly whether you've noticed heavy legs, swelling by the end of the day, or those small visible veins that worry so many people. I read every single comment that comes in on these videos, and that genuinely shapes the topics I choose to cover going forward. So this isn't just me talking at a camera, this is a real conversation between the two of us. For centuries, across different cultures around the world, the wisest civilizations already understood something that modern medicine is only now starting to confirm with serious research. That certain fruits contain compounds capable of strengthening the walls of our veins from the inside, not just temporarily relieving a symptom, but actually working directly on the very structure that holds up the circulation in our legs. And the fruit I want to talk to you about today, the one I genuinely consider the most powerful of all for this specific purpose, is the pomegranate. Yes, the pomegranate, that fruit most of us only really know for those bright little red seeds that show up on holiday tables every December, almost more as decoration than as actual food. But inside that peel, the part most people throw straight in the trash without a second thought, there's an extraordinary concentration of compounds called punicalagins, specific antioxidants that, according to several studies, help strengthen the walls of blood vessels and naturally improve the blood flow returning from your legs back up toward your heart. I'm not talking about some overnight effect here. I'm talking about something that builds over time, the same way heavy legs didn't appear overnight either. Let me explain why this happens to so many people after 60. The veins in your legs have tiny valves, like little doors, whose job is to push blood upward, against gravity, all day, every day, for an entire lifetime. As the years go by, those valves and the walls of the veins lose some of their natural elasticity, a bit like a garden hose that, after years sitting out in the sun, loses the firmness it had when it was new. When that happens, blood tends to pool in the legs instead of circulating as easily as it used to. And that's exactly what we feel as that heaviness at the end of the day, that swelling around the ankles, those small veins that slowly start mapping themselves across the surface of your skin. And here's the thing, this doesn't only happen to people who sit all day, it happens, often even more strongly, to people who stand all day too, the way so many men and women who spent decades working behind a counter, a register, or a factory line know all too well. Let me also explain something most people don't understand about why simply drinking water or walking a little isn't always enough on its own. The venous system in your legs depends heavily on the structural strength of those vein walls, a kind of internal scaffolding that holds the whole system together. When that scaffolding weakens with age, it isn't just a matter of moving more, it's a matter of actually reinforcing the structure itself from the inside. And that's exactly where certain natural compounds come into play, helping to strengthen that connective tissue in the veins, giving it back some of the firmness it had decades earlier. Think of it almost like the mortar between bricks in an old house. The bricks themselves might still be perfectly fine, but if that mortar starts crumbling, the whole structure becomes less stable, even though nothing about the bricks has actually changed. Here's where boiled pomegranate peel comes into the picture, in a way most people have never heard of. The preparation is simple. You boil the peel of one whole pomegranate, well washed, in about a liter of water for 15 minutes, letting it release that deep reddish color, along with all those compounds that are actually far more concentrated in the peel than in the fruit itself. You let it cool, strain it, and drink it warm or cold throughout the day, almost like a tea. Many of my patients tell me that after a few weeks of drinking it consistently, not overnight, but with patience and consistency, they notice their legs feel noticeably lighter by the end of the day, that the swelling they used to have after taking off their shoes at night has noticeably decreased. Let me tell you about a patient of mine, a man named Walter, 74 years old, who spent decades as a postal carrier, walking miles every single day delivering mail through every kind of weather before retiring to a much quieter life. When he came into my office, his legs already showed several visible veins, and he himself told me, "Doc, this is just what happens to a man who spent 40 years walking a mail route. Nothing to be done about it. My father had the same legs by the time he was my age, and so did his father before him." I explained calmly that wasn't entirely true, that even with decades of standing and walking behind him, his circulation could still improve with a few simple, consistent changes. And among those, I suggested this pomegranate peel tea along with short walks after each meal. Nothing dramatic, just 10 minutes around the block or around his own backyard after dinner. 3 months later, at his next visit, he told me, without my even asking, that his legs no longer felt heavy by the end of the day the way they used to, and that he'd gone back to wearing a pair of boots he'd put away in the closet because they'd stopped fitting comfortably with the swelling he used to have. He told me, with that grin I still remember, Doc, I can finally crouch down and play catch with my grandson in the backyard without paying for it the rest of the afternoon, something he hadn't been able to do without his knees and ankles aching for the better part of 2 years. Now, a quick pause here, because if you've made it this far in the video without skipping ahead, that already tells me something good about how seriously you're taking care of your own legs, more seriously than most people, who'd rather just ignore the swelling until they simply can't ignore it anymore. Go ahead and tap that like button if this is proving useful so far. It genuinely helps this information reach more people our age who really need to hear it. And let me know in the comments, did you already know about this use for pomegranate peel? Or is this completely new information for you? I read every single comment without exception, and a lot of the time, those comments are exactly what give me the idea for the next video I record. There's something else I want to share with you about this fruit, something very few people know. Pomegranate doesn't just help strengthen veins from the outside in. It also contains compounds that help keep blood flowing more easily in general, something in medical language we call mild antiplatelet properties, meaning it helps prevent blood platelets from clumping together excessively, which supports more fluid circulation overall, especially in areas where blood tends to pool more, like the legs. It's important you understand this correctly. This doesn't replace any medication your doctor has prescribed for circulation. And if you're currently taking a prescribed blood thinner, it's essential to talk to your doctor first before incorporating this on a regular basis, simply because both work in a somewhat similar direction. And your doctor needs to know exactly what you're taking in order to take the best possible care of you. I've seen patients who, with the very best intentions, start combining natural remedies with their medications without telling their doctor, assuming that because it's natural, it can't possibly cause any harm. And while in the vast majority of cases there's no issue at all, it's always better for your doctor to have the complete picture of everything you're taking. No exceptions, even something as seemingly harmless as a fruit peel tea. Another thing I learned over the years of practice is that pomegranate works far better when paired with small movement throughout the day. Not necessarily intense exercise, simply not staying seated or standing in the same position for hours and hours at a stretch. Something as simple as standing up every hour, walking around the house for a moment, or just circling your ankles while sitting watching your favorite show in the evening helps those pomegranate compounds do their job far more effectively, because circulation works better when the body moves, not when it stays completely still waiting for one single thing to do all the work by itself. And here's something I suggest to a lot of my patients who enjoy a weekend trip to the farmer's market the way so many families do, instead of asking someone else to go for you, or staying in the car while someone else does the shopping. Walk through it yourself. Take your time picking out fruits and vegetables the way you always have. That simple, unhurried walk among the stalls is exactly the kind of movement your legs need, and you actually enjoy it too, which is the best way for any habit to stick around for the long haul. I also want to touch on the strength side of this because so many of you watching are dealing with both heavy legs and a noticeable loss of strength at the same time, and the two are actually more connected than most people realize. When circulation in the legs improves, the muscles in your calves and thighs get better delivery of oxygen and nutrients during everyday activity, which means they recover faster between uses and respond better to the light strengthening work most people can still do at this age, things like standing up from a chair repeatedly, or simply walking a bit farther than you did the week before. I've watched patients who started this pomegranate routine purely for the swelling end up noticing, almost as a pleasant surprise, that their legs also felt less fatigued climbing the same flight of stairs they'd been struggling with for months, simply because better circulation means every other effort you ask of those muscles becomes a little easier to recover from. I also think about Sunday afternoons after church, when so many families gather to eat together and then sit around the table talking for hours, which is wonderful for the soul and for the family. But I'd suggest that every now and then, get up, help clear the plates, walk a little around the backyard while everyone else keeps talking. Small movements that don't take anything away from that valuable family time, but that give quite a lot back to your legs. I also want to mention something about diet in general, because it goes hand in hand with all of this. Excess salt in our food, something so common in our cooking, in our gravies and our sauces, directly contributes to fluid retention in the legs, making that heaviness so many of my patients complain about even worse. I'm not telling you to eliminate salt from your life completely. That would be unrealistic, and frankly, not very enjoyable, especially when it comes to the flavors we grew up with, Grandma's pot roast, that gravy that's been in the family for generations. But I would suggest paying attention to more processed foods, bouillon cubes, deli meats, which tend to have far higher sodium amounts than most people realize, often hidden under names we don't even recognize on the label. A simple alternative I suggest to my patients is seasoning more with fresh herbs, a good squeeze of lemon. Instead of relying so heavily on the salt shaker, the flavor stays just as good, simply different, and your legs will thank you for it over time. Something else I want to share, directly connected to all of this, is the importance of staying hydrated throughout the day. It sounds almost too simple to even mention, but a lot of my patients over 60 unknowingly cut back on how much water they drink, sometimes out of worry about needing the bathroom more often, especially if they're heading out somewhere or going to church and would rather not deal with that concern. But when the body is dehydrated, blood becomes slightly thicker, which makes the job harder for those veins that are already fighting gravity all day long. A simple practical indicator is checking the color of your urine throughout the day. If it's a very dark yellow, you probably need to drink more water. There's another simple thing I recommend to every single patient, and it costs absolutely nothing, and that's the position you sleep in at night. If you sleep with your legs completely flat, at the same level as the rest of your body, blood has to work all night against gravity with no help at all. Something as simple as placing a pillow under the foot of the bed or using a firm cushion under your calves while you sleep slightly raises your legs above the level of your heart, and that gives your circulatory system a real rest during those 7 or 8 hours of sleep, a rest that translates directly into less swollen legs when you wake up in the morning. It's such a small change that a lot of people underestimate it, but I can tell you, after years of recommending it, it's one of the pieces of advice I get the most thanks for, because it requires absolutely no effort, just a well-placed pillow before bed. I had a patient tell me that after trying this for just 1 week, the first thing she noticed when she woke up was that her wedding ring, which normally felt a little tight in the mornings, suddenly felt comfortable again. A small but very telling sign that something had genuinely shifted in her circulation overnight. The kind of small detail that often convinces a skeptical patient far more than anything I could explain to them in the office. And while we're on the subject of small daily habits, it's also worth mentioning footwear, especially for those of you who spent years in work boots or stiff shoes for a job that demanded it. Tight shoes, or shoes that don't allow your ankle to move naturally, make it harder for blood to pump back up from the foot toward the leg, because that natural ankle movement is actually part of how your body helps move blood upward with every single step. I'm not telling you to throw out every pair of dress shoes you own for special occasions, simply that for everyday wear, for those walks to the market or those afternoons around the house. Comfortable footwear that lets your foot move freely makes a real difference. Your legs will thank you for down the road.